his counselor hath taught him? With whom took he counsel, and who instructed him, and taught him in the path of judgment, and taught him knowledge, and showed to God the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing. Then after talking about the majesty and the great creative power of God in a rather vastly impersonal manner, suddenly he changes pace and breaks the thing down in terms of the greatest intimacy, an intimacy that is so tender that it almost breaks the heart. Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the Creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary? He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young man shall utterly fall, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Why? Because the same God that measures the waters in the hollow of his hand, that meteth out the heavens with his span, that comprehendeth the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighs the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance, is also the whisper in the human heart. Tremendous, isn't it? Well, let's look at another one. Over about, this really isn't the sermon, but it's much, perhaps it's even better than the sermon. Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant. Now this is, you're familiar with this, many of you, because it's interesting, even in the caption that's up at the top of this book. This is the old, this is the King James Version. Up at the top it says, Christ's passion foretold. That this has come down through the one of the great traditions of Christianity, that the prophet Isaiah was talking about Jesus Christ here. But it is very, historically, it is very evident that he wasn't, but that's all right. We'll talk about that a little later. Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant. That's beautiful poetry. And as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness. And when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should deny him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he hath done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. What a curious combination of ideas. It pleased the Lord to bruise him. He, the Lord, hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Well, that's enough. It is impossible, of course, to deal with Deutero-Isaiah in a single sermon or a single lifetime of sermon making. So that I shall do two things this morning in connection with it. First, a simple statement of the historical picture that you might get a feel of the time and the mood and what was the certain important aspects of the contemporary scene with which this unknown prophet had to deal, and then lift out of the tremendously moving dynamics of his religious experience and his intellectual concept what seems to me to be his timeless utterance for the human spirit, at least one of them. This unknown prophet of the exile was the contemporary of Cyrus. And Cyrus will be remembered in history as a young man with a great idea and a great passion, a sort of forerunner of empire dreamers who, by their strong right arm and their swords and their shields and their armies, lay waste the populations of the earth. That was Cyrus, a powerful man. What would have happened in human history what will happen in human history when we are able, in the normal pursuits of life, to provide the kinds of challenges that will exhaust the creative minds of great tempestuous human spirits, so that the resources of those minds will be channeled in ways that are redemptive for the life of the race. What would happen when that? It's a great tragedy that our civilization, we had no way by which we could channel a man like Adolf Hitler. It's extraordinary. Just think about it for a minute. That's, of course, it's an aside and it's off the point, but it's the same problem, isn't it? And even in public school education, What is the problem in the public school classroom when you have a very able boy in the class, a very able girl? You don't know what to do with him. That's the trouble. You don't know what to do, so he's always in trouble. I don't mean that everybody gets in trouble is brainy. I don't mean that, but you see what I mean, that we don't know. We don't know how to structure the creative mind. We only know how to deal with mediocrity. So we make the creative mind again and again a malignant growth in society, causing all kinds of confusion and chaos. Well, anyway, Cyrus was such a mind, and he, the thing that I like about reading about him is the fact that he attacked the man who's supposed to touch anything and it became gold, Croesus, you know. He laid siege to Croesus' empire, and Croesus said, well, just a little upstart, I won't pay any attention to him. And a year passed, and another year passed, and he couldn't get out, couldn't get any water, couldn't get any food, so he gave up. Now, at the time that Cyrus was moving across the pages of that particular aspect of history, there was stirring in the mind of a prophet, an unknown prophet of Israel, Deutero-Isaiah. What was at first a throwback from the accumulated prophetic wisdom of Israel, namely that Jehovah was related specifically and concretely to Israel, and that the fate of Israel was wrapped up in the movement of Jehovah across the stages of human history. And if Jehovah did have an intimate relationship with Israel, then it must mean that Israel will be useful to Jehovah in carrying out his will and his words. How could Israel do this? Well, Jerusalem is gone. Most of the Judahites have been taken into captivity or have been scattered, the largest group being down in Babylon. They're everywhere. Now, perhaps they have been scattered. This is the way the prophet's mind was working, you see. They have been scattered in order that wherever they are, they might give to the people by whom they are surrounded the message of Jehovah. But they can't do that, as he thought about it. They can't do that because there's no central place. There is no spot from which may emanate this peculiar genius, this peculiar faith. A faith has to be embodied in some kind of concretion, some kind of symbol, some point of contact in space and time, so that the believer can multiply his exposure to that contact, and by that multiplication distill from the multiplicity of his contacts the spirit of the place. So they have to have Jerusalem or some place like Jerusalem. And so the purpose of all of this movement among the peoples is to shape the kingdom so that Israel may be, the Judahites may be released, and they can go back to Jerusalem, build the temple, reestablish the worship, public worship of God, and then with Jerusalem as a center, all of these people will move out to the ends of the earth carrying the message of Jehovah. Beautiful. And who is going to precipitate that? Cyrus. Does Cyrus know that he is an instrumentality of Jehovah? Not yet, but that's all right. He is. So, Cyrus finally conquered almost everybody. And then the word went around that Cyrus is going to issue a decree that would permit the Jews to go back to Jerusalem. You see? And the prophet is beautiful in the words that he uses about it. What a wonderful thing it will be when from the holy hill there will be the beauty and the wonder and the glory of the reestablished temple, and then he becomes almost chauvinistic in his thinking about it. But Cyrus issues not a great big decree, but a little decree. And the little decree set limitations upon the number of the number of people, the size of the temple, all sorts of details that I need not bother you with. And then, after the first disappointment, the second disappointment was the fact that all of these Judahites didn't want to go back to Jerusalem. He'd assumed, you see, that everybody was home hungry. But they weren't. They'd been living in Babylon, these other places. They'd settled down and established very happy communal relations. And they didn't want to go back to Jerusalem and start rebuilding something. So the prophet feels that all of his hopes are gone, that the people themselves, only a handful, but as we look back over 27 centuries, well, it was about 27, 8 centuries ago when this happened, and the number that went to Jerusalem numbered about 40,000, but as we look back, that's a great number. But the prophet, in his enthusiasm and in his ecstasy, was sure that that was just a handful of people in comparison to the hopes that he had. And why didn't they go back? That was his problem. Why didn't they go back? If the relationship of the Jewish community to Jehovah is an automatic one, if to be a Jew is to be inspired by the mind and the will and the morality of God, then does it not follow automatically that all of these Jews would beat a path back to Jerusalem as soon as the ban was lifted? But the fact is that they did not. And the prophet had to face it. Either his concept was wrong, that there is an automatic moral relationship between being a Judahite and Jehovah, or the relationship between the Judahite or the Jewish person at that period and Jehovah is a relationship that is contingent upon something that is not merely the accident of history. And if that is true, then I must rethink my whole relationship. And that's what the prophet does. He says, I see now that merely because a man is a Judahite doesn't mean necessarily he's interested in Jehovah. He may not be. Then what is the difference between a Judahite who's related to Jehovah and one who isn't? The difference is a difference in moral character. And now he's on the verge of a great discovery. If it be true, then, that the thing that relates the Judahite to Jehovah is the quality of his heart, the attitude of his mind, the degree to which he follows the movement of the Spirit of Jehovah in his heart, then may that also not be the relationship of any other man to Jehovah. Do you see the corner that he turns? No, you don't. Let's work at it, because we can't leave this until we get it, because everything else is contingent upon it. You see, his thinking was at first that to be a Jew was equivalent to having an automatic spiritual relationship with Jehovah. You were born with it. In other words, you were birthright Judahite. All right. Now, if that is true, then when the ban is lifted, so that all of these Jewish people that are scattered all over the world can go to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, then they would do it by virtue of their relationship, this automatic relationship with Jehovah. But the fact remains that they didn't do it. Why didn't they? And when the prophet dealt with the question, he had to revise his interpretation of what it means really to be related to Jehovah. In other words, he had to redefine what it meant to be a Jew. And now he arrives at a conclusion that a person is a Jew who is related spiritually, in attitude of mind, in attitude of spirit to Jehovah, and not merely because he was born in a certain family or he belonged chronologically to a certain tribe and so forth and so on. Now, the logic of that meant that if it be true, you see, that the thing that determines whether or not a man is a Jew is not his birth, not his roots, but his moral and spiritual awareness and character, then any man who has that awareness becomes, in the language of the prophet, a Jew. That's what he says over and over again. All right. Now, let's push it just a little further. Now, if every individual stands in immediate candidacy to be related to Jehovah in that way, because he stated it, every individual stands in immediate candidacy to become a Jew, then the relationship between Jehovah and all of the other peoples of the earth becomes a very interesting one, and that leads me to the heart of the next problem that he has to face. If God is the God, in some peculiar sense, if God is the God of Israel, then what about the other people that are not Israel? Is he their God too? If God makes the snow and the ice and the rain, if God moved in the mind of Cyrus and made Cyrus open up all of this process in order that the movement of the message of Israel might be precipitated, then how can I combine that notion of an impersonal creator of the universe with the intimate, private, personal God of the human spirit? It is one of the central problems of religion that has never been solved in terms of logic or metaphysics or even theology. And here it's stated all over again, you see, just as you stated. Don't you state it for yourself? Doesn't it occur to you again and again that if God is the creator of all the planets and the stars and all this process that is life, how can he be bothered with little me and my little problems and my little world? When, as a matter of fact, it doesn't make a great deal of difference whether I live or die. Few weeks, tears will all be dry. Life goes on as usual. Almost. It's the same problem. Now, what does he do with it? What does he do with it? He says, in the passage that I read to you, he doesn't attempt to work it out in terms of logic. He doesn't attempt to work it out in terms of metaphysics or any kind of dogma. But he at once moves into the realm of personal and private experience. He says, with my mind, I'm aware that there is a source of all of this. There is an order that generates all these things of which I'm but one tiny microscopic part. At the same time, I'm also aware of the fact that there are moments when in my own heart there's a stirring. And when I'm tempted to give up, I don't give up quite. When I'm so weary that I can't stand any longer, somehow I stand. How to account for it, I don't know. But both experiences of the human spirit and the individual are true experiences. That's as far as he gets. Now, then, after the people did not come back, and he is very discouraged and brokenhearted, he asked himself, what is the meaning of the Jewish people? What do they mean? Why was I given this insight? Why am I part of a whole long line of men of insight? What's the point of it? I don't know. Perhaps, if it's true, as I believe it is, said the prophet, that God broods over all of the peoples of the earth and all of nature, and since he cannot be partial, you see, he can't be partial. He can't really care more for Israel than he cares for Egypt, Babylon. But the fact is, Israel has had an intimate experience with him over all these years. And if Israel did not have this experience because God was partial to Israel, then that Israel had this experience must be a part of the divine plan. See how his mind works? Now, if it is a part of the divine plan, then what part is it? that the role of Israel is to reveal to the minds of the peoples of the world what is the true nature of God. And wrestling with that concept, there bursts out in the mind of Deutero-Isaiah clearly, for the first time in the whole history of the Jewish community, and for the first time in the history, as far as we're able to ascertain it, of the human race, the concept of an ethical monotheism. And what does it say? That there is one God. One God, who is at once the God of the human heart, the God of human history, and the God of the world of nature. One people have had a rather peculiar experience with him, and that experience is a functional one. And what is its function? To make available to the rest of the human race the moral quality of their own experience. But don't you know that if you do that, people will kill you? Don't you know that if you make it your business to be, as a result of some deeply lying spiritual compulsion, if you make it your business to be the conscience of the nations, either the nations must become as it is the will of God that they may become, or they must compensate for their lack by laying the lash on you. Is the will of God. And as long as they reject that will, they will have to persecute you. And when they persecute you, don't hate them. Remember, God laid this assignment upon you. And he has not given you any burden so heavy that you will not be able to bear it. And you will see that out of the stirring of that womb will come 3 great movements, symbolic movements of the quest of the human spirit for spiritual reality, and the ethical backbone of civilization after civilization. So out of the spinning mind and turbulent heart of Deutero-Isaiah moved Judaism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy mind, heart, soul, and strength. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Out of his stirring came Christianity, with its insistence upon one God and the human family regarded as bound together by love, tenderness, fellowship. Out of his stirring came Mohammedanism. There is but one God, says Muhammad, Allah. And Muhammad is his prophet. Out of the stirring in Deutero-Isaiah, the long march of the cycling series of struggles by which at last the individual becomes conscious of himself and therefore conscious of the things that are done against himself. And out of that movement, the whole genius of the democratic dogma. All the stirrings are right here. If you don't think so, read the books. And for that, you will be beaten with many stripes. I may say to you, my friends, that I cannot, with my mind, nor with my spirit, possibly apprehend the meaning of the miracle that the Jewish people represent in human history. I don't understand it. Even my mind and my emotions get all tied up. Hounded everywhere, persecuted, the whole Western civilization piled high with the whited bones of exhausted Israelites. In country after country, any roll call will reveal it to you. Down to the present moment, in our country and other countries of the world, suffering servant, that was the concept of Deutero-Isaiah. That God lays upon you this, and it is the price that you pay, because you have learned so much about him due to the long exposure that your spirits have had to the movement of his Spirit. And therefore, you will have to be his instrument of redemption. But if you, and I'm through now, but if you don't do it, if you try to escape it, this will happen to you. You will escape everything but the suffering. If you stick to the concept, even the suffering in you as a people will be redemptive. For even the youth shall run and not fail, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that tarry, with God, shall walk and not faint.